My name is Robert J. Cassinelli. My age is 73. It is September 23rd, 2015. The location is Sacramento, California. My relationship to my partner is she is my best friend ever and the sister I always wanted.
My name is Ellen C. Dove. I'm 71, but almost 72. It's September 23rd, which is a holiday for me, and I'm fasting, so you better watch out if I pass out. I'm here in Sacramento, California, and Robert is my best friend, and we've adopted each other as siblings because neither of us had a sibling of that gender. Okay. You want me to ask, what is your first memory of me? And I remember the first time we met, but I don't know what your impression of that day was, but you know mine. I've told it to you before.
You have told it to me before, but here's my first memory of you. You know my opinion of attorneys, and my first memory of you was, oh my God, another attorney, another black and white person who sees things between the lines and does not understand the variety of the world and the universe. And of course, what happened over the many years of our friendship is I have discovered that you do have that kind of mind that I so respect. Although on occasion you become that lawyer person. There have been times when that's good, and there have been times when that's not so good, but mostly good.
But see, you often accuse me, not just state that I'm a black and white person, but when I'm black or white, I am so far out of the normal box that you have to look at it. It's not even gray. It's some purple color, because even though I see certain things as black and white, I'm so crazy in the way I think that it doesn't relate to the way other people would see black and white. But what's really, really interesting, as diverse as our backgrounds are, which we can describe if you want to in a minute, we are so similar politically. We have political discussions and they never turn into arguments because we just discovered we're in tune that way.
As a matter of fact, we are, as far as the political spectrum is concerned, I consider us to be left of center, but not all the way out to the far reaches of that particular side of the spectrum. What I would say is there are aspects of my political opinions which are libertarian, but they're not subject to discussion right now. The point, of course, for me about this was my friendship with you and how I feel about you in terms of that issue you raised about how we've metaphorically adopted each other. As I told you so long ago, there are some things you just cannot discuss with a brother or your mother or your dad. And it would have been great when I was a kid to have a sister to talk to. I have never forgotten something you told me a long time ago about my naivety when it comes to women. And you know what? I'm actually proud of that because it is premised upon the idea that women and men are equals. And so when I meet a woman, that's how I'm going to treat her. And I'm still confused about that.
But you have an influence in your life of a very strong mother.
Mm-hmm.
A strong and wonderful mother. I never met her, of course, but you know that your mother and my mother would have been good friends.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
You would have liked my mom, and I would have liked your mom. But my mother, who I'm very mindful of, because today would have been, it's my parents' anniversary. And so, and I can't calculate, but they got married in 1934. So they were married for 54 years before my dad died.
1934. That'd been 81 years.
But my mom, my mom had so many sayings.
So did mine.
And I hear yours, take a Dutchman, as he says, not, or as he means not as he says. And I hear so many times now myself saying as my mother used to say, and we do become in some ways our parents, not your natural father, thank goodness.
Yes.
But we adopt their good things, and at the same time, as much as we don't like it, we adopt their bad things to some extent. I don't think my kids do that. And I don't know whether your kids did that.
Oh,
but
because I've seen your kids. I've met both your son and daughter and their spouses. Trust me when I say they mirror you. I don't know about your ex-husband, but there are aspects of
wait a second. Alex does not mirror me that much.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. In my opinion,
He's a wonderful kid.
Well, of course he
is
is.
a wonderful kid.
You know,
But
just like mine
sometimes
are.
when he does some of his father's things, it
makes you crazy. But anyway, moving on past that experience of our first. What's your first memory of me? And I do remember when we first met.
I'm not going to say what I heard before because that's not polite.
I know what you heard before.
Okay, so I went
Consider
back,
the source.
I went back to Janish's office to do something or meet somebody, you included, because I met George, who is an interesting wacko. I didn't recognize it quite at the time. I met him at the law library, and he heard what I was researching. So I went back to the office to meet this attorney, and he had already described you in an extremely disparaging way. And so when I first met you, I'm sure I was single then. I can't even, yeah, I was single then, and I knew you were not single then. But I had the picture of what he said you were. And when I first saw you, I was like, no, well, you weren't fat. Not to my description. And I didn't know about the other word, but it was, okay, now you, in my mind, had to overcome a hugely negative impression that I had. And I kept you at great arm's length.
Yes, you did.
Because I filtered you through George for a long time. And it wasn't until later when he threatened to burn down my house if I changed a word of his document that I recognized the extent of his insanity. But during the period of time that I worked with him and worked on the case and got to know our mutual client, talk about nutty, I began to notice your calm, your savvy, your wisdom, and your dedication to everything you were doing. I mean, you dedicated a lot of time to our client for no pay, admittedly, but no thank you type reward. I mean, really, her ingratitude was monumental. But you stayed, and you wonder why I still stay, and that's, the reason is because when I make a commitment, I don't quit. And I made a commitment to see the project through, and I'm doing that. But you were the kind of teacher, if I had teachers like you all the time, I would have gone to school forever. You were so dedicated. No, really, it's not to butter you up. Mm-mm. Sometimes you had things your students wrote, and you would share them with me to get my views, and you didn't just grade a paper and give it back. You made comments, you said what you thought, and everywhere we went, because by the time we became friends, we used to hang out and go to a lot of restaurants. It seemed like almost every restaurant, there was somebody there who'd been your student. And they all respected and remembered you fondly.
Well, it's interesting. There's an expression you used toward me in the early years of our relationship. You haven't said it in a very long time because I probably stopped doing it. But you used to say to me, Robert, you're teaching again.
Because you're not a teacher anymore. When I said that, it's because you were preaching really more than teaching. But mainly you were telling me what I already knew, and it was annoying.
Well, yeah, it was annoying. But the bottom line is I never assume that people know what I know. I always have discovered over the course of my now 3 careers to assume other people know what I know is to frequently make a mistake. And those kinds of mistakes cannot be undone. Or it takes a lot of effort to undo them. In terms of our friendship, you have seen me through some particularly tough times. You didn't know me at the time of the death of my nephew, but you are certainly familiar with the story by this time. You have been there for me as even though we met about 7 or 8 years after it happened, no, it was more like 9 years after it happened, I was still in a grieving process because it had hurt my brother and his wife so terribly.
But also because he was up for parole every few years.
And it was
every
renewed.
time you had to go and speak on it, it raked up things again.
Yeah, and of course, as you know now, and as I now know, I'm a Vietnam veteran, and I have PTSD. And what I discovered is there's no cure. What you do is you learn how to cope with it. You don't let it control your life. You certainly have witnessed me in that state, for which I will again apologize, even though that was several years ago, because I now recognize the hurt and the harm being in those states can cause to the people you love the most. And so your friendship to me has been hugely valuable, supportive, and the thing that I love the most about our relationship is, despite the fact that many people think, "Are you married?" and we both respond.
We talk like,
we
a
talk
cranky
like,
old married couple.
like a cranky old married couple, and we sometimes finish each other's sentences, and it is a function of the fact that we frequently think alike. I love that you take into consideration our sometimes differences of opinion about things.
And I tolerate knowing you're wrong.
And I tolerate knowing you're wrong. It's so to have that kind. I have other close friends, but I have no one closer than you. And for that, I am eternally grateful. And as I wrote on the form they had me fill out, I'm grateful for each day I have because I've been close to dying. I have witnessed death. I have faced it, not defeated it because nobody does. But to know when I wake up in the morning that my best friend is there when I need her or when I just want her to talk to or to bounce things off of or to get her opinion, and you always have an opinion, even if it is sometimes wrong. And I can count on that. And it's something that gives me an occasion to pause, to think, to analyze, to change my mind if it's necessary. And certainly I know this about you. When you are presented with facts, you may
That
not...
I might believe.
that you might believe. When you are presented with facts, you will take that in just like I do. And this is where we are remarkably similar. You will take those facts in, and if you need to change how you feel about something, you will. and it's not a well, I've had that opinion for all of my life, so therefore it must be right, despite all of the things that I've now learned.
But I won't change my habits, as you know.
Well,
But
yeah,
my opinions are a different issue.
yes.
But you talked about me giving you my opinion. I want to slightly change that. You much more appreciate me giving you my viewpoint, which is not always an opinion. It's just a way of looking at things. And that's the male and female. You often look at things the way a man does. And then I will say, wait
Well,
a
I
second.
am a man.
I know. I realize it gets in the way sometimes. But no, sometimes I say to you, look, have you thought about what she really meant or what she really did as this? And you always, happily, will stop and think and say, hadn't thought of it that way. But once I say that, it makes sense to you. You don't get mad and you don't argue. But I want to go back to something you said, okay? Or I want to go back to an impression. Before I met you, I really wasn't close with anyone who had been through the Vietnam War as a combatant. I was in the military. I was a military spouse who was stationed in Japan, and there were people I knew who were coming and going from Vietnam, but I didn't have anyone in my life I was close with. And when I knew initially in our earlier years of our relationship, I knew you were a Vietnam vet, and I took that piece of information and I set it aside as if it meant nothing, no more than if you came from Chicago. And in the more recent years, when I know you've been exploring, I'm running out of voice. When I knew you were exploring what it meant to you, and you started going to classes and taking anger management classes and all kinds of counseling and groups, and where you met with people at the vet center, and you invited me to go with you to meet some of those people and experience things.
That was actually the combat trauma group graduation.
Well, but I've been to more than one thing with you
Yes.
now, but I've come to look a completely new way because I'm, by listening to you and listening to what you've learned about yourself and about everybody else, to recognize there's an entire population out there who had some type of experiences somewhat similar to yours. And it's a completely different world, a new world. I mean, I was mostly at home, but some of the time in Japan, but more likely than not, I was not shaped by any experiences in Japan of that sort, although I was certainly shaped by that experience. It was quite interesting to me. But you had a view of an entirely different world. You still have concerns about where you sit, but before I knew why you did that, I know that there's a group of people who don't like to have their back where someone come up behind them. But I never noticed that's what you were doing. I just figured you were picky about your chair. And until someone really expresses things, I had a client who, when that air gas explosion went off, he was a Vietnam vet. He dove under the sofa. He thought we were being attacked. And I told you about that.
Yes, you
and
did.
You understood in a way I never understood. But now I understand more. But happily, I will never understand. But on the way down here, we talked about our politicians thinking it's perfectly okay to get us into a war. And so,
Yeah, it's interesting. Regardless of the rank, my own experience, and I knew general officers. In fact, I talked with them, briefed them, wrote for them during my military career, and I knew some subsequent to my retirement. And I don't know any of us who want to go to war. Now, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't be willing to do it again. Certainly on, you know what I did on September 12th, 2001. I called the Air Force recruiter and tried to go back into service because I had particular and specialized knowledge about the people the people who did the attack, and I was a year too old. And so I know this is true of many veterans, not all, but I'm certain it's a huge percentage of us who look at people like the current crop of politicians, and it's good to see that there are veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts who are now being elected to office because they bring a special appreciation for the act of war to their deliberations in representing us. The bottom line is that there are no winners in war. There are conquerors, but there are no winners because everyone comes away wounded. And sometimes you come away, even though you're walking around, you come away dead. And I've known veterans like that. And you can usually find them on the street, addicted to some substance or to alcohol, because it's the way they kill the memories.
Or it was cheap and plentiful when they were over there, and they
Yes.
just got addicted that way.
Yeah, I had a young man who was in the hooch in the bunk next to mine who was addicted to heroin, and one day he was there, and one day he was gone.
Okay, Robert, how can you reconcile this feeling of mine I'm going to express? If there was a war, well, my son's too old now, but this was a yesterday thought. I would not want my son to have to serve, to go overseas and to be shot at. How can you reconcile me feeling that way with you knowing that you gave 20 years?
I can only remark the experience of my male family members who all served, and both my fathers-in-law who served. The first one in World War I, the second one in World War II. I remember as I was leaving my parents' home on my way to Travis Air Force Base to go to Vietnam, and my dad, who was a combat engineer in Europe in World War II, and combat engineers have a particularly tough job right after Marines. They're usually in the front lines, almost always. And he looked at me, and he said two things. He said, be sure to write your mom and be safe. In other words, implicit therein is he didn't want me going because he knew what I was about to face. But he wasn't going to
didn't tell you not to.
The choice was mine. And I would tell you the same thing. Your son is an adult. The choice is his. It is something you have to reach. You do. When I came back from Vietnam and my son was approaching the age where it was possible he could be drafted, my first inclination was to give him the money to go to Canada.
Okay.
Okay? That was my first inclination. I came to a place where I recognized that even if I had done that, there was no guarantee that he would not have done the exact opposite of what I wanted him to do, what I fervently desired for him to do, which was to be safe. And of course, going to Canada, he would have been safe. But would he have been following what his heart told him to do? Don't know. And I would tell you the same thing about your son. And by the way, he's not too old. You don't remember.
He's 45.
You can be up to 58. And
Really?
Go. Yes.
Wow.
I was 59 in 2001. You can be up to 58, and depending on your skills, they will take you.
Huh.
And I'm guessing that your son would be great in logistics.
Yes, but not
Contracts.
as a warrior.
Not
He
as a
probably
warrior.
would be a good shot.
Yeah. Yeah, but the bottom line is that no parent can decide for a child once the child has become an adult that decision. You can't.
You know what? You just made me think of something. When we're young, you probably don't remember, but I lived back east. My name was not yet
I'm
Dove.
really sorry about that.
My name wasn't yet Dove because I wasn't married to Richard, but we were together. Maybe it was even after I was married. I was quite a hawk. My thought is,
I remember you telling me.
if you're going to go over there, just bomb them, nuke them, and go home.
You
But
and Barry
don't
Goldwater.
spend your time there. But now, in my younger days, I also was extremely anti-NRA. I thought that those people are really fringy right-wing weirdos. But now, as I'm getting older, I'm mellowing out and I'm thinking a little differently. And I wondered if you had thoughts about bearing arms and people with guns, because especially now, there's a lot of people, and I don't think this used to happen, because maybe it did and we didn't know about it, but people are going out and shooting up other people who are totally innocent and just minding their business in a mall, in a downtown street, blowing up people at marathons. There just seems to be so many more crazy people with armaments of various sorts.
Well, it's interesting you raised that, because I'm on a blog called Cultural Explorers, which was begun by a Southern Baptist minister whose acquaintance I made when I was down in Texas. And turns out we are related through my uncle, who's now passed away. He's like the fourth or fifth cousins 20 times removed or something like that, because the last name is the same. And I said at the time I met him, I said, I wonder if we're related. And he did a little research, and turns out, yes, we are.
Wait,
well,
he
at
was
least
a Cassinelli?
no, he's a coffee. My Aunt Marie's husband. And somebody sent out a meme about the Swiss and having every male citizen is issued a weapon by the Swiss government. And from the age of 18 to the age of, I don't remember what the maximum is, but it's something like 45. And you are subject to call up as a member.
Only males?
Only males.
Well.
Wait, just let me finish.
Okay.
And so this meme shows up, and I made a comment, and it is about Second Amendment rights. But what people don't know, and a Swiss citizen responded to this, because the meme was actually sent out by someone who's one of those gun nuts, and because that person didn't do the research, he or she did not know what the requirements are. You're given a gun, but you're given no ammunition. Sounds like being in the Air Force. It's the ammunition is locked up in the main building of the city or town where you live. And if there's a need for you to have the ammunition, when the call goes out, you report to that place. They will give you sufficient ammunition to meet the needs of the circumstance and so on. And one of the things I commented on was the fact that this should be gender neutral, that if we're going to give weapons to men, they should give them to women as well. And some guy got on there on the blog, and he was talking about criminals having guns. And there's one of the things I pointed out to him is, you didn't hear me object to the Second Amendment. I said, what I said basically was, what the Swiss are doing seems to be working really well, because they have literally no murders, literally, by guns.
But people can go get bullets
somewhere
else, you know.
Yeah, but to cross the Swiss border, if you know anything about passport law and borders in Europe, to get into Switzerland, you go through quite a bit. In terms of,
No, I went by train. Nobody bothered anybody.
if there was a need for them to go through your luggage, they would have gone through it.
Oh, you mean like the thieves who went through and stole our...
Yes, exactly. So in response to your question, how do I feel about this? I am a great believer in fact, I gave 20 years of my life to the idea of defending the Constitution. As a teacher in the state of California, you swear to defend the Constitution. Now, we take that metaphorically and literally to mean that in the classroom, we're going to defend what that document means to our students. In other words, if we get questioned about it, we will help them, try to help them understand what it means. You certainly remember the experience of acting as a judge in the mock trial we had in my government class. And I know you enjoyed that experience because you saw a lot of young, vibrant minds at work. And there were a couple of people that you told me afterwards, that person could be a great attorney, because just the way they approached the whole mechanism of the trial process. And so I'm a great believer in the things the Constitution stands for. As far as the Second Amendment is concerned, I put a great deal of credence in the word militia. And it would be my personal opinion that we need something like what the Swiss do. But it should be gender neutral.
Today, there was a passage in the prayer book that really rankled me. There was a title, it was called Failures of Justice. But when you read what it was about, it didn't talk about the failures of justice that I observed. And the rabbi told a story without knowing that I was caught up in this, because there was a recent conviction of the guy who was charged with killing the little girl, 13-year-old, in the park.
Yes.
And they used some DNA because it was on a cigarette, and the cigarette was in the vicinity. And the family and the defense team and the person are adamant that he did not do this. And we were talking about how people respond and how they're going to treat the mom when she goes back to work on Monday morning, so to speak. And how can you just be casual about it? Do you not mention it? Do you condemn her for being the mother of a now convicted murderer? But it just struck me that we needed a prayer, so I made up a prayer for that we have people who are charged with crimes unfairly be given justice and due process, and people who are charged with crimes appropriately be given justice and due process.
Sounds like my best friend, the attorney, and
And
things
it
that we've
sounds
talked
like
about.
what our Constitution provides. And my big frustration right now is I don't see justice occurring anymore. And maybe it never did, or maybe I'm not recognizing it or such. There was a time when all the judges were older than I was. Now there's a time I'm older than most of them. But I don't see justice occurring. And so many times, like I was down in Orange County a couple weeks ago, the judge said, geez, I'm really sorry about your client's circumstance, but he doesn't meet the criteria because it's a 3-pronged criteria and he's only got 2. And the agency that needed to give the approval for the 3rd one wouldn't do it. And basically he said, you just got to go sue him. I don't want to hear that from a judge.
Well,
I want him to say, you've given a good reason why that 3rd prong should be excused.
Well, and it's something that I tried to do as a teacher, and certainly in terms of my responsibilities when I was in the Air Force. There has to be a moral aspect to the law. And this is what I talk about. Wait a minute, let me finish.
There has to be. How do we get it back?
This is what I talk about when I talk about the black and white, the lines that law school, as you know, I was asked why I didn't go to law school, because I knew that even in Law 101, I would have picked a fight with the teacher, because things would have been proposed to me.
And the judge.
I would have been cited for contempt of court I don't know how many times. I'd have probably been doing more time than my clients. But the bottom line is that there has to be and this is what all of our great philosophers teach us, This is what all those great holy books teaches, copies of which I have multiple versions on my bookshelves at home, that if you lose your morality, you have lost your humanity. And I have witnessed over the years of our relationship, in the times I have sat in court with you on cases where I've worked with you or where I've just been there to witness what was taking place, I have seen the loss of morality, i.e., humanity, on the part of not only the justices, but those who supposedly
Counsel.
represent the people and the defendants or the plaintiffs, regardless, because they don't have that kind of moral sense. And I am reminded of what Socrates said about youth of his time. You know, they're failing us, etc. And of course,
Wasted on the young.
yeah, youth is wasted on the young, basically, and that's not true. And here's what heartens me. In my classrooms were young people, both in high school and later at the university, who do care passionately about those issues about which you and I are concerned: morality, justice, equal treatment under the law, due process, and that sort of thing. I remain hopeful for the future. I cannot do otherwise. And I believe that is a function of the things I have faced. When I went into that operating room all those years ago, it's coming up on 5 years now, I knew I might not come out. And when I did, there was such an overwhelming sense of gratitude. And one of the first faces I saw was yours. Okay?
And Debbie Lee's.
and Debbie Lee's, yes. And she who will not be named. But the bottom line is that I have to, once you have faced death, as I did in Vietnam, and then faced the possibility of dying under the knife of someone who's trying to help you remain alive, you cannot be anything but grateful for the life you have, for the day you have, and for the possibilities of tomorrow, knowing that there will be those in whose hands you have placed tomorrow, and they will do the right thing.
See, you have faith that they'll do that. I don't. You saw some students that gave you that faith. You also, well, you taught a lot of teachers, so that gave you great
Future
hope.
Future teachers.
Right. Well, teachers to be. Well, we're all teachers in some respect. But see, I didn't have that perspective. I see through my grandchildren probably more than any other way, a whole bunch of kids who don't seem to care about the greater world. And maybe that's just a function of their age.
But think about your own granddaughters. And I know them. And they do care about tomorrow. Yes, they do.
In
yes.
the smaller sense, yes.
Because they're children yet.
Someone has told them that and taught them that very wisely. I'm one of the lucky people in the world. You know that I know this, that I have a daughter who married someone I love and a son who married someone I love. And that's the luckiest way you can ever be.
Well, I have adopted granddaughters, so there you go. You know, and it's... I am glad I've done this with you because have we got time for one more question?
Well, have you been?
Two,
Really?
Okay.
I never noticed. I didn't see you doing it.
Is there anything you've always wanted to tell me but haven't?
No, Robert. You know by now. First of all, if there were, I wouldn't do it on the mic. But second of all, I have never held back. You know that. Whenever you do something that displeases me, that concerns me, that scares me, certainly I speak up when you drive.
Never mind, I'm a good driver. Okay, well, in response to the same question, no, there is nothing I can tell you today or would tell you today that I have not told you in the past. and would not, and I certainly wouldn't be reluctant to tell you in the future, because that's how valuable a true friendship is, as that expression on the wall in my kitchen is. A true friend is one who takes the wheat and the chaff, and with a breath of comfort blows away the chaff and keeps the wheat.
But now you can't do wheat if you're going to be gluten-free.
I'm not going to be gluten-free because I don't believe in that.
And Robert, I want to say what you always say. Who loves you?
You took it away from me.
I
You
know.
better. You better.
And that's what I always answer.
Yes.
We're done.